He met them separately. Now, Donald Trump says he's arranging a summit between Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Both leaders have expressed a willingness to meet. But would that lead to a deal to end the war in Ukraine? And if so, what would be the terms? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy returned to the White House for a much-anticipated meeting with Donald Trump on Monday. His last trip was widely considered a failure, with intense public berating from Trump earlier this year. But on this trip, he had some considerable backup, from the French President, German Chancellor, and UK Prime Minister to the head of the European Commission. They knew the stakes were high, coming on the heels of Friday's cordial meeting between Trump and Vladimir Putin in Alaska. And for the most part, they got what they went for, a security guarantee for Ukraine from Washington. The next step is a meeting between Zelenskyy and Putin in the hopes of signing a long-term peace agreement. So, was this a win for Zelenskyy? Can Ukraine avoid ceding land to Russia? And what's the impact for Europe's future? We'll get to our guests in a moment. First, this report from Imogen Kimber.
A warm welcome for the Ukrainian leader by the President of the United States. A big contrast to the tense encounter between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskyy earlier this year.
You look great.
This time, Trump even complimented Zelenskyy on his suit. Trump says he will provide the security guarantees that Ukraine wants.
When it comes to security, there's going to be a lot of help. It's going to be good. They are first line of defense because they're there. They're Europe. But we're going to help them out also. We'll be involved.
While Zelenskyy agreed to buy $90 billion worth of weapons from the US.
We have possibility now to buy weapons from the United States. We are thankful for this program and this opportunity. We are thankful for Europe. They pay for this and through NATO program. Nobody in Europe has so many air defense like Patriots, for example.
For the European leaders who came with Zelenskyy to the White House, the security of Ukraine and that of Europe's borders are vital.
When we talk about security, we're talking about the security not just of Ukraine, we're talking about the security of Europe and the United Kingdom as well, which is why this is such an important issue.
The issue of ceding Ukrainian land to Russia was discussed, but without conclusion. So was an immediate ceasefire, which Trump says is not necessary for a long-term peace agreement. That's in line with the Russian president's thinking. But Ukraine and the Europeans are pushing for a stop in the fighting.
Now the way is open for complicated negotiations. And to be honest, we all would like to see a ceasefire, the latest from the next meeting on. I can't imagine that the next meeting would take place without a ceasefire.
That next meeting would be between Zelenskyy and Putin. After that, there would be a three-way meeting with the US.
Thank you very much.
According to Trump, if those meetings don't go ahead, the alternative is that the war goes on. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
All right, let's go ahead and bring in our guests in Kyiv. Maria Mezentseva is a member of Ukraine's parliament and head of the Ukrainian delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. In Washington, D.C., Jim Townsend is Adjunct Senior Fellow in the Transatlantic Security Program at the Center for a New American Security. He previously served as Deputy U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense for European and NATO Policy. A warm welcome to you both. Thanks so much for joining us today on Inside Story. Maria, let me start with you today. So, unlike that very contentious meeting that Volodymyr Zelenskyy had with Donald Trump in February, the one in which Zelenskyy was publicly berated while he was there at the White House, the meeting that happened on Monday was cordial. There was a lot of concern in Ukraine after Trump had that summit in Anchorage, Alaska, with Vladimir Putin. What's the mood in Kyiv after this latest meeting between Trump and Zelenskyy?
As I'm reporting right from the capital today, and I've been to next to the front line, which is the city of Kharkiv, I must say that indeed Ukraine nation backed President Zelenskyy and European leaders yesterday at the Oval Office and in the further discussions. And it's been taken very positively by Ukrainian public, by Ukrainian army, by business people, by medical doctors, everyone who's fighting today at their different front lines. Therefore, I must say we are very much anticipating the next meetings. And of course, we were very, very much pleased to know that the sort of swap of the land issue was not on the table, because it sounds like we have to swap our land to our land, which makes it legally ridiculous. And further on, the situation for the issue of security guarantees, the commitment of the US, of EU partners, the funding of weapons, joint ventures in this new warfare of drones, for instance. Air defense mentioned by President Zelenskyy. We are the country which currently able to buy systems like Patriot, NASAMS, IRIS-T, but we need the efforts also from the partners to produce them, because it takes time. And of course, for us, it's crucial to hear that the intentions of First Lady, Madame Melania Trump, are continuing. President Trump confirmed that further activities on exchange of prisoners of war, civilians in captivity, to bring them back home, and of course the issue of stolen, illegally deported 20,000 Ukrainian children being now in Russia, in Russian captivity as a genocide committed by Russia, will be a driven force in the coming discussions. We are ready to talk, we're ready to discuss, we're ready to negotiate, and we anticipate next meetings.
Maria, I'm glad you brought up the issue of land swaps, which has come up the last few weeks. I'm going to get to that shortly. I want to ask you more about that. But you say that, you know, as far as the Ukrainian government, that there is a willingness to meet. You think that this is going forward. I'm curious if you think that this proposed bilateral meeting between Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelenskyy, or perhaps a trilateral meeting between Trump and Zelenskyy and Putin, do you think that's actually going to happen? Where exactly does this go from here? And when do you think these meetings might take place?
I think it should be in the coming months, in the coming weeks, I must say. We've heard from the media a possible date of the 22nd September. It's very close. It's almost tomorrow in terms of diplomacy. I do believe that Ukrainian leadership was very blunt and underlined the fact that we are not willing and not ready to actually negotiate our land. You see the footages from my home city, Kharkiv, when just a day ago, a Russian missile hit a civilian building, killing 5 people, including 1.5-year-old child. So it's not about pieces of land or regions being close or further from the borderline with Russia. It's about the people, about our nation, about unborn children who are being killed as well. So the unwillingness and on the Russian side. On our side, we are willing to discuss. As of now, the borderline, we have some success in liberating villages yesterday in Sumsky region, in Kharkiv region, where there are also good news coming, even from Donbass, because otherwise, you know, it would not make sense. We could have swapped something to something 11 years ago, but we fought. And we keep on fighting. I think international law here shows that it's not only empty words, and international law is playing a big part here. We can't open the Pandora box to legitimize illegal annexations. Otherwise, the whole world map will be redrafted.
Jim, the German Chancellor, when he was meeting at the White House, insisted that a ceasefire was an important precondition to any trilateral meeting going forward between Trump, Zelenskyy, and Putin. French President Emmanuel Macron agreed with that. Trump, before he met with Putin, kept insisting that he wanted to see a ceasefire before things would move forward. That position shifted, notably after that summit in Anchorage, Alaska. Now he talks more about a larger peace deal. why is Trump no longer insisting on a ceasefire?
Well, I think he believes, well, first of all, Trump wants to get this done as soon as possible. And I think his experience with ceasefires like in Gaza or other places like that, his experience has not been a good one because those ceasefires never hold. And it becomes a source of frustration for him. So I think what he's really looking for is a real knockout blow where he can get something done in one fell swoop, some grand bargain that he thinks he might be able to do. And in Alaska, at some point, Putin must have given enough of an indication that, yeah, that's what I want to do too. We can get this done and we can move on to business deals or something like that. So I believe that's where Trump is coming from, is that he thinks he can get things done more quickly. But he will see in the coming weeks, as my colleague just talked about, there are a lot of very complex issues ahead that have not been agreed to, such as land swaps, so-called land swaps, the return of children, reconstruction, war crimes. There is so much still to be done before you can agree to something big. And frankly, I think this work has got to be done before the leaders meet again. I can't see that you would have a bilateral meeting between Zelensky and Putin, even if Putin agrees to meet with Zelensky, who he doesn't see as an equal. If they even sat down at a table and the work is not done, then I can't see them negotiating with each other. They don't like each other. They're not going to come up with a solution. That's got to be done earlier by staff's meeting. And I think that will start. I hope it will. But there's a lot of work to do. And I would love for there to be ceasefire. I think all of us would. But right now, that's not where they are. And maybe what we'll see is Trump changing his mind as this stretches on in terms of negotiations, and maybe he'll reverse himself. But right now, I don't think it's in the cards.
Jim, just bear with me for a minute because we want to bring in a third guest to the panel, and I'll get back to you in just a second with another question. Joining us from Moscow is Pavel Felgenhauer, a Russian defense and foreign policy analyst. Pavel, I'll get to you in just a minute. I want to go with a follow-up question out to Jim. Jim, the White House is pushing for Ukraine, or has pushed for Ukraine in the past, to make territorial concessions in exchange for NATO-like security guarantees. From your perspective, I know this is all very complex and there's a lot of lack of clarity right now, but from your perspective, what kind of guarantees might we be talking about? I ask this because the language, as I mentioned, has been a bit vague. It's been a bit all over the place. We heard about security guarantees from the U.S. Then we heard that these guarantees would be coordinated with Europe. What do you think all of this means for the U.S. and what role potentially might they play?
Well, that's a great question. It's something we're all asking here on the outside because we've just heard about the broad concept that everyone seems to have agreed. And even President Putin is saying he's willing to go along with some type of security guarantee, but no one has defined what they really mean. My fear is that President Putin has one view of what a security guarantee looks like in practice. President Trump might have another idea that he's been presenting to the coalition, who have their own idea of what it looks like. So there is so much work to try to define what this security guarantee means. But it is critical because without something that is credible, that is locked in, that has agreement, without something like that, the Ukraine is not going to approve anything without knowing that they've got a guarantee that's better than the Budapest memorandum that they had a few years ago that obviously failed. And just to get to your question, I think the most important part of this is the Article 5 guarantee, where it's the members of the coalition will pledge to one another. If one comes under attack, they all come under attack. That's critical. Another critical component is a strong Ukrainian military presence. That's something that Putin has said he doesn't want. We haven't heard anything about that, but you can't have a coalition of the willing in there without a strong Ukrainian military partner to work with. The final point is this. The rules of engagement will be what shapes what this coalition force looks like. What that means is agreement by all the parties that if the sovereignty of Ukraine is abridged by Russian forces or something, that the rules of engagement say that this force either participates in pushing back on the Russians militarily, or they're not going to do that and they're going to go back home or something along those lines. The rules of engagement will dictate what this force looks like. Either they're a fighting force or they're not. And that's a big decision for that coalition.
All right, let me go to Pavel now. Pavel, thanks for being with us here today on Inside Story. Let me ask you about the view from Moscow. Where do you see things standing right now when it comes to any type of either ceasefire deal or overall peace deal? Because the language on this has changed over the course of the last couple of weeks. Do you believe that Vladimir Putin would be willing to have either a bilateral meeting with Zelensky or a trilateral meeting with Zelensky and Trump?
Apparently, President Putin said so publicly that he is not against meeting Zelensky someday. But in the Russian old tradition, the Tsar says, yes, he's a good guy, but there's always the Mr. Net, the foreign minister, the person who says no. And today already Lavrov said that there's a meeting between Putin and Zelensky can only happen if it's well prepared. It will maybe happen someday in the future, but not right now. And about the security force in Ukraine, the foreign ministry just yesterday reiterated that any foreign troops, NATO country troops appearing in Ukraine would be a casus belli. Russia would attack them immediately. That's totally out of the question for Russia. No security forces in Ukraine from foreign nations. So that means that right now, neither the security guarantees are not agreed with Moscow, neither the summit with Zelensky is agreed, because yes, right now in Russia, in the propaganda machine, Zelensky is called cocaine Führer, meaning that implying that he is a user of cocaine and that he is a Nazi. I mean, and turning around and having him sit at the table with Putin would be a big stretch even for the Russian propaganda machine. So right now, I don't really see that happening in 2 weeks or anytime soon. Of course, I may be wrong, but this summit would not give actually Moscow what it really wants. And today in an interview, again, the foreign minister Lavrov said that Russia wants the same thing as always, change in Ukrainian government, the rights of the Russian people should be enshrined, Russian territory should be freed. I mean, actually, the Russian official position on Ukraine didn't change whatsoever, despite all these summits.
Pavel, based on what you've observed, do you think that President Putin would be willing to make any concessions going forward? I mean, does Putin see any incentives out there when it comes to the potential for what the White House has in the past called land swaps?
Of course, Russia would want to see the Ukrainians retreating from the Donbass, basically from Slavyansk Kramatorsk, which is a well-fortified Ukrainian position. Apparently, Putin said that in exchange for that, there'd be a freeze on other fronts, but he didn't say how long that freeze is going to last, how many weeks, I mean. Because a Russian position is that Zaporozhye and Kherson should also be handed over. That also didn't change. Russia is trying right now, the Russian strategic objective in Anchorage and other places is to separate the Russian-American relations from the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, to have separate relations with Trump, to kind of have a détente with America, and also separate as much as possible America from its European allies. That seemed to work very well in Alaska. The yesterday summit in Washington seemed to be a step backwards, but I don't think that Russia will actually change its strategic push to separate and try to explain to Trump that he should not really get involved in all these messy matters.
Maria, I know you said earlier that the Ukrainian government perspective, at least today, is that people were happy that they don't believe that land swaps were on the table anymore. But it's something that's come up quite a bit the last few weeks when it comes to statements and rhetoric we're hearing from the White House and from American officials. I want to ask you about how difficult it would be for Volodymyr Zelenskyy to agree potentially to anything that would mean losing territory to Russia. Because according to the Ukrainian constitution, as I understand it, Zelenskyy cannot simply give away Ukrainian territory. I mean, wouldn't a national referendum have to be held and the Ukrainian people would have to decide before any serious negotiation on something like this were to happen?
Well, that's the point. If that would be a peace agreement, which is not for a purpose of long-lasting and just, so because justice has to be served, peace, this agreement, for instance, would never be ratified by the current convocation of Ukrainian National Parliament. Never it would be supported or backed by Ukrainian nation. For the last 11 years, we're fighting, used to be one of the largest armies in the world, but we've proven that it's only large in numbers, but not large technically. An interesting question, why Russian leadership is asking security guarantees from American partners. This is so funny to say, but they have requested that. And in their sense, it's us having a sort of losing or dropping our intentions to be a NATO member state, yet again, enshrined in our constitution as an ambition, both for EU and NATO membership. Second, lowering in numbers our troops. Third, as mentioned by others, the absence of the presence of foreign troops, even though there are volunteers from various states across the globe who are bravely fighting shoulder to shoulder in the armed forces of Ukraine for independence, democracy, and the values we share. So I will tell you, security guarantee for Russia would be only one. It's the absolute erasure of Ukraine as a nation, as a state, in its contemporary historical borders, because back in centuries, Ukraine was bigger. So currently, according to the UN Charter, according to the international law, Russia is just breaching all the rules being established 75 years ago, and we can't allow that. Meanwhile, special tribunal for the crime of aggression is in progress and will be set up in The Hague. Meanwhile, ICC's warrant is still legal to Putin for deportation of Ukrainian children. Still, the killings haven't stopped. So the isolation of Putin hasn't occurred in the big framework. The fact that he visited US on special occasion for temporarily lifted measures of restrictions doesn't bring him to the world stage still. So I think indeed the different policies will be played here and Russia will drag the leg somehow. I would like to remind to all the viewers that President Zelenskyy, from first minutes of this brutal war of aggression launched by Russia, invited Putin to talk, to meet, which was rejected. So I don't think Putin is ready himself. He's not ready to stop this war because it serves his regime.
Jim, I know you touched upon this in previous answers, but I want to just try to drill down a little bit more if possible. For the European leaders who came with Zelenskyy to the White House, it's not just the security of Ukraine that's of paramount importance, right? I mean, it's also the security of Europe's borders. Based on what you saw, do you think that the Trump administration is sold on this idea as well? And what kind of impact are we looking at when it comes to Europe's future?
Well, that's a great question, and it's not one that is well known, frankly. But the president alluded to that as you did your clip. I heard it really for the first time, where he said that Ukraine was the front line for Europe. When he was talking to the European leaders, he acknowledged that Ukraine is the front line for European security. And so that's the first time I've heard Trump acknowledge that he even understood that geopolitical or that strategic point, that it's more than just Ukraine when it comes to the European nations. So, and this is critical for them. Their view is that once Ukraine is solved one way or another, that there's going to be a very large Russian military that's going to have a top-of-the-line drone capability. They'll be battle-hardened. The economy's on a war footing. And for the European nations, they are seeing this as a threat to them, that they'll be next, depending on what happens again with Ukraine. You hear that from the Balts, you hear that from Poland. Defense spending is going up across Europe and most nations, not all, but in most nations. And that's one of the reasons this coalition of the willing has come together. It's because they're so concerned about that. And NATO is also concerned about it. As you know, for the past number of years, NATO has put together a new war plan in case of an ally being attacked. There's NATO forces that are deployed forward. So this is something that is foremost in the European leaders' mind. When they came to Washington, they came not just to back up Ukraine and Zelenskyy because of the justice of it, but they came because they were concerned about their own security too, and they wanted to make sure that there wasn't something discussed or decided that put them at risk.
Pavel, after that summit that happened in Anchorage, Alaska, there was a lot of analysis. Many analysts said that they believed that it was a win for Putin and that he had effectively bought himself more time. I want to ask you, do you think that Putin believes he has bought himself more time right now? Does he feel essentially victorious after that summit in Alaska?
Well, many in Russia felt victorious after the Anchorage summit, that this was a great diplomatic victory. And time is, of course, essential because Russian intelligence, military and political, are saying for some time that Ukraine is in the last throes of total disintegration, that it won't last till New Year, that just several months and Ukrainian military will collapse, the Ukrainian state will collapse. So there's not much incentive right now for Russia to really sign anything with Zelenskyy, but it's all the incentives to sign something with Trump, because Russia wants to have a real rapprochement with the United States right now. So that was basically about that. And the Russian strategy is to separate American relations with Ukraine. Maybe Trump will get tired of the Ukrainian issue. Right now, you hear nothing about Greenland. Everyone forgot about Greenland. The Danes are the most lucky guys. I mean, everyone's talking about something else. So maybe Trump will forget about Ukraine or move away. And then Russia believes it will solve the problem and it can deal with the Europeans.
All right. Well, we have run out of time, so we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Thanks so much to all of our guests, Maria Mezentseva, Jim Townsend, and Pavel Felgenhauer. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the entire team here, bye for now.
Don't miss out and get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.